All right. Good evening, everyone. Pastor Tim here. And as always, when we log on, we're going to give, we're going to give people a few minutes to connect with us and to basically sign on to what we're doing here this evening as we dig into our next stretch of classes. So I'll give people a couple minutes and remind you that as you sign on, if you could just let us know you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. That's always helpful. Just, say your name and then also let us know what town and state you're watching from. We're going to be digging into an interesting topic tonight, I think, world religions. This is our first of 4 classes on the topic of world religions. I hope that it offers us some insight into, I think, a really interesting and important topic. I'll just say, like I said earlier today in my Facebook live stream, that I think this is a very relevant topic for all of us just by the nature of what the world is and the direction the world's going. We're becoming more globalized and more diverse. So we should be aware of different religious perspectives out there and understanding them with an honest and with a ability to critique and analyze fairly. So I see Kelly's with us. Hey, Kelly, thanks for joining us. And Leslie, thanks for joining us as well. I see somebody gave us a thumbs up. Always helpful if you'll do that. Just give us a thumbs up. Let Facebook know you're watching. You can hit the smiley faces and the likes and things like that. That's always helpful for Facebook to know that we have people, joining in and engaging in the content. So, hey, Frank and Diane, thanks for joining us from Algonquin, Maine. Glad to have you guys with us. Got about 20 people signed on so far. We'll give a little bit more time and let people join us. I'm up in my studio attic up here at the Carpenter household. It is so interesting from day to day. Sometimes it's freezing cold up here. Sometimes it's just right. It's like moving toward just right, but it's been quite chilly just because the weather is so cold out. So I think I'll be okay for the next hour or so as we spend this time together. Hey, Amy, thanks for joining us. Nice to see your name. Look forward to seeing all of you at some point back in person when we get back in person and are gathered together. Hey, Joe and Deb from Vero Beach, thanks for joining us. Rita and George, thanks for joining us as well as you sign on. Like I mentioned, as you sign up, you can just hit that thumbs up button, hit that heart button, the smiley face. That engagement shows that Facebook that people are actually watching us tonight. Hey, Billy, and I see Martha's joined us as well. So thank you guys for tuning in and being part of the crew that's with us this evening. Marie, thank you for joining us as well. Diane, thank you for joining us as well. Yeah, all right. We're gonna jump into our content now. It's about 7:03. So as other people join in, just leave a comment. We will have an opportunity tonight and in future nights to dialogue a little bit back and forth as we talk about this topic of world religions. I've got a PowerPoint that we're going to work through, and you can feel free to share notes. And as always, if you have questions, tcarpenter@bethanychurch.com is my email. You can reach out there, and glad to interact with you there. If you don't want to leave comments here on the Facebook page. Hey, Patty, with Sally Welch and Susan Mitchell from Algonquin, Maine. Hey, friends, good to see you. Mark and Jean, good to see you. And Mary and Lynn, thanks for joining us as well. All right, so let's jump into the topic of world religions. Excuse me. The purpose of our class, our time together, is we want to gain an understanding Christianity as a religion, and then also how to contrast it with other major world religions out there. So we want to get a clear sense of Christianity and what it teaches as the foundations of it as a world religion. And then we want to take that and to be able to contrast it with other religions that are out there. And so tonight we're going to lay the foundation for that work as we dig into the content. So here's a resource for the class. I highly recommend this book. Excuse me with my voice. This World Religions book will not take you to like the college level or the graduate school level. It's not meant to do that. It's really made to be a primer, just like it says, World Religions Made Easy. So I want to encourage you, if you get a chance, pick it up. You can just, we sent out a link. I think it's also available on the, if you go to the Bethany Church website, go to Hope Rising, you can click on the link for this class and the link should be there. But you can just go to Amazon and type this in, or go to Google and type it in, World Religions Made Easy. It's by Hendrickson Publishers. And it's going to give you a nice overview of some major world religions and then take them and contrast them with Christianity and talk about some of the similarities and differences between the two. I think this is a great resource, again, to enter into the topic. It's not an exhaustive study of any of these religions or of Christianity, but it'll give you a good sense of gaining some insight into the topic. If you do want other resources, reach out. I'll be glad to share some other resources with you. I was just thinking to myself, I believe his name was Huston, not Houston, but Huston Smith if I remember, wrote a book on Islam. I can remember walking around the block in my parents' neighborhood in New York, reading that book years ago, and that was a very helpful resource to dig into the topic of world religions. But anyhow, here's a resource that we'll be using in the weeks to come. So tonight's topic is thinking clearly about world religions. We're not going to get into digging into one specific religion tonight. That'll happen in the future. But tonight we want to think broadly about how do we think clearly about the topic of world religions. So what is a religion? How do we actually define religion? It's kind of an interesting thing when you dig into the topic of religion, that it can be harder to define than you'd think. When I was in graduate school studying sociology, I took a class on sociology and religion, and my thesis was on this topic of religion. And I did a paper one time on defining religion, and you'd be amazed how much people have wrote about this topic and how much you have to dig into it to really understand it, right? Because religion is, I think we assume we understand what it is, but it's really important we operate from the same definition. And I use this example all the time, but if you're critiquing me based on some understanding you have of me, but that understanding isn't true, then it's actually not a fair critique. And so when we're talking about religion, we have to actually mean the same thing. Some would go so far as to say science or scientism, the love of science and it as a worldview, is a religion. Some people would even say atheism is a religion, which is interesting to think about because atheism is the rejection that of the idea that God exists. But if you say religion is a way of viewing the world, then atheism could be a religion, right? And so we need to make sure that we're using we have the same understanding when we're actually defining the terms and we engage on the topic. So religion is a belief, according to the dictionary here, the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. The idea about the relationship between science and religion is kind of a quote. It's a particular system of faith or worship, a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes with supreme importance. That last definition you see really gives you that sense that religion isn't just about God. For some people, religion is like, what is the thing that drives you and is consuming you and you're really passionate about? So when we think about the topic of religion and understanding it as a concept, you can see here, I put this picture up of like the world and then all these different religious symbols. A lot of us think about religion in these terms of Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, right? We also think about it as our relationship of how we connect to God. And sometimes we contrast science and religion and how those two things can be at odds with one another. You see this book by Emily Skylum on the bottom, The Religion of Self-Enlightenment. That's another way to think about religion. How do I become fully human? So as we start here, we have to have a clear and shared definition of this world religion if we're going to dig into it and investigate it and be fair about how we're talking with it with one another. So I think it's interesting to note that for some, religion is a part of life. It is one element of life. For others, religion is the defining reality of their life. Their religion defines everything else. It's an interesting phenomenon that in Western culture today, religion is having less and less direct and obvious influence on culture. It's very much more subdued. But in many Eastern countries around the world, religion is the dominating worldview. The religion influences everything else. The politics, the policies, the economics, all these things are driven by a religious perspective. So for some, religion is a piece of life. For others, religion is the thing that defines all the other pieces of life. So here's this quote, religion is an important part of my life, is that first quote. Okay, so it's an important part. It's one element, but it's not the whole thing. Larry David says that on something almost on the opposite side. Religion doesn't play any part in my life in terms of how I live my life. But I don't think I've ever gone through a day in my life without hearing someone say the word Jew or saying it myself as a Jewish man. So he's seeing that it's not this dominating reality of his life, but it certainly has an influence on how he actually lives out his life. This quote from Andy Griffith I found, and I found this in multiple places on the internet, was really interesting. Religion has been an essential part of my life ever since I was baptized. My personal journey with God has been very important throughout my life. I do think it's interesting that even though it's clearly much more important to Andy Griffith and maybe to Larry David, he still kind of describes it as a piece. It's a very important piece or element of his life as opposed to the overriding structure that guides his life. So here's a way to think about it. For those who religion is the dominating element that drives their worldview, it's really an umbrella under which everything else falls. So you have religion, and then you have work, you have family, you have recreation, other study, relationship, finances. Religion, for many people, pours into all these other areas so that it's going to influence how you think about work, how you think about family, how you think about recreation. Now, if you identify yourself as a follower of Christ, you're a disciple, you're a Christian, there are some people who still say, okay, religion or my relationship with Christ is a piece of the puzzle. Interestingly enough, part of Jesus' perspective on religion is that it is not religion, that religion doesn't allow itself to be an element of your life. It becomes the defining reality. Following Jesus, loving God, is the thing that drives all our other relationships and how we think about the rest of life. So Jesus would look at this and say, yes, if we use the word religion to talk about kind of a connection with God, it defines how everything else is going to be carried out. There are other people who see life this way, right? So the umbrella is life, just this generic concept of being alive, existing on a planet. And life has many elements underneath it. You see it's work, family, recreation, other, study, relationships, finances, and religion. Religion is a piece of life in this model, whereas in the previous model, religion is the defining reality that drives or shapes the other pieces of life. And those are two different ways of thinking about religion, right? Now, this is a classic line I hear in Christianity often, right? Christians often say Christianity is not a religion. Religion is humans trying to work their way to God. Christianity is God coming to men and women through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And then John 3:16 is down there on the bottom. I often heard it kind of summarized this way. Christianity is not about religion. It's about relationship. And I've said this 10,000 times, so let's make it 10,001. One of my college professors, her name was Michelle Dillon. She was my sociology of religion professor, and she used to use this example, and I'll never forget it because I think it's super helpful. She said, if you were ever on, back when Larry King was a big thing, if you were ever on the Larry King talk show, and he asked you, is America a Christian nation? She said, the first question you ask is, what do you mean by a Christian nation? And then she said, if you mean, are we more influenced by Christianity than every other religion? Then absolutely. Are our founding fathers and founding documents influenced by Christianity as well as the Enlightenment? Absolutely. Are we a Christian nation in that every rule comes directly out of the Bible? Then no, absolutely not. It depends on what you mean by it when you say, are we a Christian nation? So in the same way, when people say it's not about a religion, it's about a relationship. If that means that we don't want to just become caught up in a system and a structure that does the right things, quote unquote, but avoids the relationship with God, then absolutely that's true. But it is really interesting to note that the Bible actually speaks highly of religion. What is pure religion, according to James, the half-brother of Jesus? Pure and undefiled religion, meaning a good thing, in the sight of God our Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their distress and to keep one unstained by the world. James 1:27. So religion in and of itself is not an evil thing. It's not a bad thing if we are thinking about it properly and living it out properly, right? So part of the Christian religion is centered on a relationship with Jesus. So these don't have to be at odds with one another. They can actually be nicely linked together, right? So for the sake of this class, when we talk about religion, here's what we're going to mean. Our definition will be this: a system of belief and or worship, usually connected to the ideas of God, morality, and the afterlife. So it's a system of belief and how it's going to influence our living, and it's connected to God and to the questions of what's right and wrong, and then to the question of what happens after I die. Those are three key elements that are tied into this definition of religion. All right, so that's what we're going to use. Religion is a shared system of belief about worship connected to God, morality, and the afterlife. That's what we mean when we talk about religion. So over the next 4 weeks, here's where we're going to go. Tonight, we're going to talk about properly assessing. How do we think about even all these different world religions that are out there? Next week, we're going to compare and contrast Christianity and Islam, and we're going to spend a good chunk of time describing the theology and getting an understanding of Islam. Because sometimes what happens is we can view Christianity and say, okay, the way I think about Christianity, I can take it and just put it as a cookie cutter on top of, here's how I process through kind of theology and action, and I'll plug that into Islam, I'll plug it into Buddhism, I'll plug it into Hinduism. But they don't actually fall in line in the exact same way. While they still wrestle with big questions, they don't answer the questions maybe in the exact same way. I'll just give you a quick example. The Quran is less like a gospel narrative or a historical book in the Old Testament. The Quran is much more like the book of Proverbs. So think about that. The book of Proverbs is all these little nuggets of truth that you have to kind of pull the idea out of. And that's what the Quran is much more like, as opposed to the Gospel of John chapter 4 is the story of Jesus doing, carrying out his ministry step after step after step after step. That's two different ways of thinking about religion. So we need to be fair as we think about Islam to get a proper understanding of it. So that's next week is going to be Islam. The following week, we're going to look at Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. These are two very popular religions in our area, not just here in New England, but like in America. And we often interact with Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons who might come to our doors. You might have family or friends who are Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's important to know and understand that A, they're not the same thing, and B, how are they different and similar to Christianity. And then last week, we're going to talk about Christianity compared to really self-religion, kind of modern day spirituality, the New Age movement, things like that. How do we think about Christianity compared to people who just say, well, I'm not really religious, but I'm very spiritual. So we're going to kind of compare and contrast those two. That's where we're going in the next handful of weeks. So I want to offer you four key ideas that we need to keep in mind when we're assessing and thinking about world religions. I'm going to go through the four, and then we're going to break them down and dig into them. That's going to be our content for this evening. So number one, we can compare religions without testing their truth claims. That's number one. Number two, many assume that all religions are equally true. They're all equally basically the same. The line would be said, we're all basically striving for the same thing. Different religions just do it in different ways. Okay, that's concept number two. Concept number three is some people assume that testing a religion is unfair or unkind. And then number four, some assume that if you disagree, it means that you hate the other religion or you hate other people. So let's dig into those and kind of break them down one by one. So we'll start with this one. Comparing, but not testing the truth claims. There is a field of study called comparative religions. And so what you do when you're in that area of study, especially in academia, is you're basically just saying, here are the facts of religion X, here's the facts of religion Y, here's the facts of religion Z, here are the facts of religion A, and you just start comparing them and say, this one believes in one God, this one believes in multiple gods, this one believes in salvation, this one doesn't believe in heaven. So you wrestle with the topics and the questions. This has its place, as I noted, in scholarship. And it's really important that we are fair in our understanding and critique of religions, again, because it's unhelpful and unproductive to falsely describe a religion and then critique something that's not even real, right? The example I used this morning is like, if you come and you yell at me because I'm a New York Giants fan because you knew I grew up in New York, and how could you like the Giants, man? You should like the Patriots, you live in New England, and you just lambaste me for 10 minutes. And then when you get done, I look at you and I say, actually, I'm not a Giants fan. I don't know why you're getting so upset with me. You made a conclusion about me, and based on a false conclusion, then you gave me all the reasons why I should change my mind. So we can do that with world religions. We can have a caricature of a world religion and then critique it, but it's actually not a fair, honest critique because we've mischaracterized it in the first place. And so you can compare and contrast the perspectives that different religions have without testing to see if something's true or not true. You can just compare them and contrast them just for the sake of, interest or academic study, right? That's the reality. Now, I put up two scholars here. The gentleman is Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman would have identified himself as a born-again or an evangelical Christian, studied at very biblically astute universities who would take what we call kind of a orthodox perspective on the Bible. Eventually, he says that he was deconverted, and I believe now he's at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he does a lot of study on the topic of religion, but identifies himself as an agnostic or atheist, probably more toward agnostic at this point. But he offers critiques of particularly Christianity, but he does so and he tries to be fair. Now, I don't think he's always fair, but there are times he was being interviewed on an atheist radio show one time, and this atheist said to him, well, I mean, Bart, let's be honest, we don't even know if Jesus really lived. And he said, wait. Whatever you think about Jesus and his messianic claims, we know that there was a man named Jesus who was very influential, who lived at the beginning of this time period for this amount of time, did the following things. So even though he doesn't believe in Jesus as Messiah and Savior, he still looks at Jesus as, yes, I know categorically that, yes, he lived, even if I don't believe he's supernatural. A man named Jesus lived, and he was very influential, right? So he's fair in his critique in some ways because he says, even if I don't believe it, I can look at it and pull the facts out of it from what we see in history and and documented archaeology and things like that. I also put up this this woman. Her name is so hard to say. Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou, I believe is how you say it. And she is another scholar who does a lot of study on the topic of religion, but doesn't identify as religious per se, right? So you can study and critique religions without actually saying, do I believe it or do I not believe it? Personally, you could just kind of do it at an emotional or intellectual distance. Now, I think it's just worth noting here that because religion as a whole, religions claim to answer the most vital questions of human existence, it's very challenging to kind of be objective or aloof or distant when you're studying the religion as compared to if you're studying something like electrical engineering or woodworking, right? If I say as a person who's studying religion, this religion is wrong, or here are the ways that I think this religion is false, I'm making conclusions about huge swaths of people. And if I say over here, I believe this religion actually identifies more with the truth, even just as a scholar, there are implications. And so I think we need to be fair to say, we can be as objective as we want, but we also need to realize that we know deep in our heart and soul, there are implications if certain things are true. We can say, oh, I'm just understanding the facts. But when we understand the religions, we understand that the overflow of the facts we believe will impact our lives. We can't be totally objective and stand outside of the religions that we're analyzing. So that's the first point. We can analyze religion without actually testing them. Here's the second point. Many assume all religions are equally true. All religions are equally true. So the image often given is that there's a mountaintop and God is at the top of the mountain, and people are just doing their best to climb to the top of the mountain. We're all just coming up different sides and different paths, right? So we're all trying to get to the top of the mountain, and we're all just doing it in different ways. Now, what I wrote down here is two distinct and opposing claims can't both be true, right? If somebody says A and somebody says not A or non-A, those things can't equal one another, right? If someone says, Tim, are you tall? Somebody might say, yes, he's tall. Somebody might say, no, he's not tall. Well, what do we mean by tall? Do we mean that I'm taller than the average person? Maybe. Am I as tall as a professional basketball player? Probably not, right? So we're not clear on the terms. But when we say, Tim, are you 6'2"? If I say yes, and then the next day I say no, you don't say, that makes total sense. You say, something's not right. He was either confused the first time and now he's clear, or now he's clear and he was confused. Like, what happened there? You say those things don't equal each other. The same thing is true when we investigate the claims of the world religions. If they make claims that are distinct and different, they can't both be true at the same time. You can say, well, this is how I feel about who God is, and someone else might feel different. Well, those are feelings. We're not talking about what's based in the facts. But if a religion claims X and another religion claims non-X, those things can't line up perfectly. It's just the facts of the situation. And it's actually unfair to any world religion to say, basically, Buddhism, you're the same as Hinduism. Any Buddhist or Hindu would look and say, that's not true. That's actually not fair. That's not an accurate critique of our religion. Judaism and Christianity are the same thing. No, they're not. There are some clear differences. Yes, there are some overlaps, but there's also some clear differences as well. And so to say all religions are basically, they're all equally true, it's not even a matter of being unkind or unfair. It's just like mathematically, logically, that's not a possibility. So just consider right here the notion of God, right? So I'm going to look at the notion of God in 5 major world religions, how we think about God. So Christianity, we have a Trinitarian God. Christians believe in one God who is expressed in 3 persons, 1 in essence, 3 in persons, or 3 in substance, Father, Son, and Spirit, okay? So that's the Christian notion of who God is. Now, when you move on to Judaism, Judaism believes, similar to Christianity, in a personal God, meaning that humans can have a relationship with God and vice versa. God is conceived by Judaism as not only the first cause, the creative power, and the world reason, but also the living and loving Father of men. He is not only cosmic, but personal. Jewish monotheism thinks of God, excuse me, in terms of a definite character or personality, while pantheism is content with the view that God is impersonal. So just think about this idea, right? So in pantheism, which is that everything is essentially God, God is impersonal. In Judaism, God is personal. In Christianity, God is Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit. In Judaism, God is singular. It's monotheistic. He is just God the Father, not God the Spirit, and God the Son. So just between those two, you can see there's a different perspective on who God is. Now, that's just two religions. Let's look at another one. Here's actually what Islam teaches about God. In Islam, God is the absolute one, the all-powerful, all-knowing ruler of the universe and the creator of everything in existence. Islam emphasizes that God is strictly singular, unique, and inherently one, and also all merciful and omnipotent. According to Islam, God is neither material nor a spiritual being. So, I mean, even the emphasis on the singularity of God in Islam is totally different than the Trinity. And if you dig up, the research, or you hop on YouTube and look, you can see debates between Muslim scholars and Christian scholars debating the very topic of the Trinity, because they realize there is a difference between a Trinitarian God and a singular God, or a God, the God of Islam. So you can see all the claims can't be true. If Christianity is true and God is Trinitarian, Father, Son, and Spirit, then that means that the singular God of Islam is not right. If, on the other hand, the singular God of Islam is right, then the Trinity can't be right. So it has to be one or the other, and the way we figure it out is by investigation, by philosophy, by theology, by study, right? Let's continue looking at some of the other religions. How about in Buddhism? Followers of Buddhism don't acknowledge a supreme God or deity. Many people think of Buddhism and they say, oh yeah, Buddha is the God in Buddhism. No, Buddha is the founder of Buddhism, but he's not God. Buddhists instead focus on achieving enlightenment, a state of inner peace and wisdom. When followers reach the spiritual echelon, they have said to have experienced nirvana. The religion's founder, Buddha, is considered an extraordinary man, but not a God. So you can be a Buddhist, and if you're a Buddhist, then you can be a Buddhist. If you are a Buddhist, your religion would say the question of God is really not central. We're not asking about God. We don't really believe in God. No God in Buddhism. Oh, it looks like we're back. Looks like I was having an internet issue for a second, but what I was getting to is to say, if we say that in Islam that God exists, and in Buddhism God doesn't exist, those things are different. That's just the nature of the beast. They cannot be the exact same thing. Here's one more. Hinduism. Hinduism recognizes three principal gods: Brahma, who creates the universe; Vishnu, who preserves the universe; and Shiva, who destroys the universe. And then there are an additional 300 million deities in Islam, or in Hinduism. So just think about that. 300 million deities versus Islam, one singular God, versus the Trinitarian God of Christianity, versus no God in Buddhism. Those things are different. If somebody said to you, does God exist? And you said yes. And to the next person, does God exist? And they said no, you wouldn't go, you have said the same thing. You would say, no, you're saying different things. So we have to understand the differences between the religions before we move to a place to understand what the religion actually teaches, right? So I just noted here, these are not all the same. These are unique claims to what is true. God cannot be one God and also be 300 million gods. Someone must be right if someone else is wrong, or they might all be wrong. Maybe every single religion is totally wrong about what they think about God, but they can't all be right because they all teach different things, the major religions of the world. Here's another kind of topic we want to talk about. Some assume that testing a religion is unfair and unkind, right? So if someone says, I believe this about religion, and I were to look and say, well, I'm going to do some critique of that religion or that worldview, others would look and say, it's not really fair to do that because that's that person's culture, that's what they believe, that's what they really feel, and so you should just let it be. So let me give you an analogy by showing you a picture. Here's the picture I want you to think about. If I were in a plane and said, hey, I'm going skydiving, and then I looked at the parachute I was about to put on, and I said, I'd like to just double check this, and somebody said to me, that's really unkind that you would check that parachute because it's going to make the pilot or the jump master feel bad. I would say, that's very interesting that they feel bad, but I honestly don't care because I'm about to jump out of a plane with this thing, so it better work. think about the eternal ramifications and even the temporal ramifications of any religion. I just noted here, considering that eternity, morality, and purpose are all tied to world religions, we do well to analyze them and to test them. No one would look at me for questioning the efficacy of a parachute before jumping out of an airplane. And so in the same way, if I'm going to put all my eggs in the basket of I'm following Jesus or I'm not following Jesus, then I do well to say, does this actually make sense to do so? And we do this in almost every area of life. We make our conclusions based on, do we think it's true or not true? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? I always think about this when I think about architecture, right? Like I look at these skyscraper buildings and how they're hundreds and hundreds of feet tall, made in steel and concrete and all kinds of things. And I look at that and I say, man, we have a lot of faith in these architects and what they're able to do, right? Now, I don't go and I test every single piece of steel or concrete, but I do have some way of looking and saying, well, based on the evidence, based on the fact that architects have built buildings like this for many, many years, they're not always falling to the ground unless maybe it's an earthquake. I do have a mental process for saying, is it safe to enter this building or not enter this building? If I walked up to a building and the entire foundation was cracked and crumbling and I saw dust kind of leaking out from the foundation, you can understand why I would say, I don't think I'm going to enter that building. That looks unsafe. And so the same is true when we think about religions. We want to be fair in our understanding of religions, but like the question said before, right here, testing a religion is not unfair and unkind. It's actually completely reasonable to test and examine a religion. You can do that in a kind way and not in a mean way, but it is absolutely fair to do that type of thing. I just think it's really important that if we're going to understand and engage on the topic of world religions, we need to be fair in our critique and also be willing to, whatever test we're going to place on a religion, we have to place on ourselves or on our religion as well. And I just tell you honestly, as someone, and this is a church, YouTube channel and Facebook page. I'm a pastor. You can see the Tim Carpenter, Pastor Kittery Point. I obviously believe in Christianity, but I don't just believe in Christianity because it's like what I was raised in or that was kind of a fun thing. I believe in it because I actually believe it's true, that you can test and verify the reality of Christianity. Not every single piece of the puzzle, but it is a most reasonable thing to conclude in the veracity of Christianity. It's not just, well, I just guess it's true. There are ways to analyze and critique and to think about religions, and genius philosophers and thinkers through the eons of time have agreed that yes, Christianity is true. Not just they like it, but that it's actually true. So if we are willing to look at another religion and critique it, then we need to be able to look at Christianity. And I can encourage you to be brave and to do that, because Christianity will stand up in its tests against, in the test of questions of truth and veracity. All right. So to assume that disagreement equals hatred is not helpful. So going back to this question of world religions, I look at a world religion and I say, I disagree with that perspective from Buddhism. I disagree with that perspective from Hinduism or Judaism, whatever it might be. That does not mean that that person is therefore hated. It just means that there's a disagreement. Now, we live in a culture today where disagreement leads to anger, cancellation, and a demand to agree with whatever the main cultural narrative is, right? So if you live in India, the main cultural narrative is Hinduism. So the question is there freedom to disagree and to not be a Hindu and to even critique Hinduism without being harmed? In the Middle East, let's say it's Islam, are you able to critique the religion without being lambasted or harmed? In America, are you able to critique Christianity without being harmed? That should be how we engage with all people, and not because it's the American way or it's the loving world way, but it's because every human being, according to Genesis 1:26, is made in the image of God. And so if I'm talking to somebody who has a different worldview, I don't look at them and say, what a fool, what an idiot. I look at them and say, somebody made in the image of God, stamped with God's divine image on this person, a person that Jesus would go to the cross and die for. And so even if I disagree with their religion, I don't have to be disagreeable in how I do so. I just want to encourage you that if you engage in conversation with somebody about world religions, whatever it is, and they start to get really aggressive and angry towards you, it's probably best just to back off. It doesn't mean you never talk it again, but to lean in to say, well, no, let's fight about it. the vast majority of times, that's not really a helpful approach. One of my favorite Christian philosophers, his name is William Lane Craig, and he operates out of Biola University, Talbot School of Theology. He also is, I think, at Houston Baptist as well. He talks about the idea that he's done debates for years and years and years at various college campuses. When he goes, he says, of his own perspective, he says, my hope in this time is less about convincing the person I'm debating against. It's more that the people out there would hear what I'm saying, and maybe that would influence or change their lives. He's less excited or hopeful that the debate is going to prove this person wrong and that this person is going to change your perspective, but instead somebody out there who's maybe got questions or doubts or is open would hear his arguments for Christianity and for who Jesus is in the gospel. So just be aware, as we have these conversations and we discuss and debate with others, let's do so lovingly, not with hatred, not with anger, not with vitriol, not with unkindness, but with care as we engage in the topic of world religions, right? So that's kind of the main thing as we engage in this conversation of world religions, especially with people who have a different perspective, is do so with kindness and generosity. I put this picture up here of the Philadelphia Statement. So probably... let's see, I would probably say maybe even 6 months ago, 5 months ago, the Philadelphia Statement was signed by a variety of scholars. And the Philadelphia Statement was signed by scholars who didn't all fall into one particular category. The Philadelphia Statement was signed by scholars and cultural critics and, high-level intellectuals who basically were saying, we cannot live in a culture in America where when someone disagrees with your perspective, the goal is to silence them. Instead, we should live in a country where when we disagree, we discuss and debate in the marketplace, in open forums, and we let the best idea win. Some people say it this way: the best way to defeat a bad idea is not to silence it, but to bring more good ideas that would overwhelm it. Right? So these scholars, again, of various political stripes, signed the Philadelphia Statement because they were concerned, because they saw this tendency in our culture to say, if the cultural narrative says X and somebody else pushes back against it, we say, just ignore them, remove them, don't ever let them talk. There's a difference between saying, hey, I don't think somebody who has failed morally in a major way should hold a high level of office or influence. That's a different topic. But if someone were to say, I believe that the best way to respond to the economic struggles is trickle-down economics. And if somebody else were to say, I absolutely am opposed to trickle-down economics. Let's say the vast majority of people supported trickle-down economics. The goal at that point is not shut this person up by overwhelming them and closing down their social media. It's to say, no, let's make an argument about why we believe this. And this side is supposed to make an argument about why they believe that. And then you have a dialogue, and the best idea wins is the concept. So these scholars, these intellectuals signed the Philadelphia Statement because they were concerned our culture was starting to say, we're moving to a place where if we disagree, destroy. If we disagree, eliminate. And they're saying, no. The nature of who we are as a country is that when we disagree, we discuss and we debate and we argue, and we can have strong opinions, but we do so respectfully without violence. This is the very approach taken by, this idea that you see in America is not an American idea. It's really a Greek idea. And you can go back to Acts 17, where Paul in Athens is invited to the Areopagus. I preached on this topic just a handful of weeks ago about the question of who is God. Paul is in the Areopagus, and the philosophers and thinkers say, tell us what you're talking about. We feel like you're bringing some strange ideas to us. It seems like you're advocating foreign gods. They invite Paul to teach them and to share with them about this Jesus that he believes in. That's the type of debate and discussion we should be in. Respectful, pointing to the facts, pointing to the truth, and yet at the end of the conversation being able to shake the person's hand and say, well done, I'm glad we can agree, and I'm glad we can disagree, and I'm glad we can even agree to disagree as we have these conversations. So I just really want to encourage you. We live in a culture that says if you don't agree with somebody, yell louder to silence their voice. I would say if you don't agree with somebody, listen more strongly so you can understand their perspective. And that will lead to more conversation going into the future. When we critique and understand a world religion, one of the best ways to do it is it's not helpful. Let me talk about the negative. It's not helpful to try to fully understand every possible piece of every world religion and then lay it all out and say, okay, now I'm going to put them in the scale and this one wins. Instead, what we're going to offer as a Christian perspective is to say, when we understand the truth of Christianity, and not just, well, the Bible said so, but how philosophically, theologically these things make sense, then we look and we say, okay, take that, now contrast it with another religion and say, okay, that is lacking because Christianity answers the question properly and this religion fails to do so. Was just having a conversation with some friends the other day about this topic. A couple weekends ago when I was preaching, we're summarizing these core foundational truths. At the core is our sermon series, right? And it's about the core truths of Christianity. And so the question is, who is God? And the answer that we offer, while it's not a complete, you can't offer a complete answer of God because he's God, but there's many aspects of God. But some of the core truths of God is that he's beyond us, he's transcendent, he's with us, he's immanent, and then God is Trinity. Now, when I say God is Trinity, I mean that God is Father, Son, Spirit. God is in community within himself. And there's a mystery, obviously, to that. But there are implications to that. Now, let's take that and let's contrast it fairly with Islam. Islam, as we talked about before, believes fundamentally that God is one. He is a singular God. There's a singularity to Allah in Islam as contrasted with the Trinity, Father, Son, and Spirit in Christianity. Those are different perspectives. So then we say, okay, is there more strength to one argument than to the other argument? Here's what I would say. The Trinity in and of itself, God in and of himself, and Father, Son, and Spirit is in perfect loving communion and community with himself. He's not saying, I need to love somebody, and so I have to create something. I need to love somebody, and so I need to create a being or create a world that makes me feel really happy. God was completely content in and of himself. So what does that mean? By implication, that means that when God made humanity, he wasn't doing it out of necessity or need or insecurity. He was doing it solely out of his desire to love and to express the creative design of who he is. That's what oozed out of him. Jonathan Edwards talks about this, that it's kind of the natural state of God to be creative because that's the core of his essence. So a God who didn't need anything, yet still chose to love and to create humanity. Now take that Trinitarian God and contrast that with the God of Islam. If God is by himself, if God is going to be loving and to be merciful as he is described in Islam, if he's going to be merciful, he needs one to whom he can be merciful. And so to express his very nature, he needs to create. That creates a philosophical issue because you have a God who is supposed to be totally sovereign and complete, and yet he is in need of something because he needs something to create so he can offer mercy. So you can see there's a difference in the Trinitarian God and the singular God of Islam. And when we look and critique those two and compare those two, we say, okay, I find that the Trinitarian God, even in the mystery of the Trinity, answers more questions than the singular God of Islam brings up. I think that's a win in the argument towards Christianity, right? And so that's why I'm saying we find the truth, and then we can see things that don't line up with the truth. And I put the picture of the $100 bill here because when you want to train a banker to identify a counterfeit, you don't teach them every single counterfeit or every single one that doesn't line up. You teach them to know and to fully understand the real $100 bill. And then when that person sees a false one, they can go, okay, that one's not real. I can tell because I know what the real one looks like. And so that's where we're going to go in these weeks, is as we understand some of the core truths of Christianity, we can say, oh, that's different than this religion or this religion or this religion. All right. So that's how we're going to think about it as we kind of dig into the topic of comparing the world religions. So next week, we're going to dig into the topic of Islam and again, compare it to the Christian faith. We're going to say, how does Christianity and Islam, where's their overlap? Where's their difference? Where are their historical challenges maybe to some of the different perspectives? I want to be really clear when we dig into the topic of Islam that there are so many right now in the time in which we live, there are so many political ideas that are tied into Islam. We're going to do our best to say where should they be attached and where should they not be attached. Just like Christianity is woven into politics now, where should it be connected and where should it not be connected? But we're going to do our best to kind of parse those things out, look at some of the clear theology and teaching of the two religions, and then say, okay, what are the implications for when these religions are lived out in the world? And so that's where we're going to go in the next week. We're going to look at Islam and Christianity. The following week, Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses compared to Christianity. And then the last week, basically New Ageism or self-religion and Christianity. I do have a video that I'm going to post on the Bethany Church page. Really interesting, basically contrasting Christianity and the other world religions. I don't know if the technology right now will allow me to share it so you can see it. Last time I did this, you could only get the audio, so I'll post the link for you so you can actually see it. But get us thinking about how to compare and contrast these different world religions. So with that, I'm going to close, give you about a 15-minute break until 8 o'clock when we were planning on ending. Somebody just asked, are the slides on the church website? They're not. If you'd like my slides, just email me. I'll send you a PDF of the slides. I don't know if I can actually attach them as a file here. I'm looking at the different options. I don't see a way to attach them as a file. But if you shoot me a message, tcarpenter@bethanychurch.com, I'll send you my slides, and you can dig into them as well. Right. That's pretty much it. So thanks for tuning in. Next week, Christianity and Islam will be the topics that we'll be comparing and contrasting. And bring questions as you start wrestling through the ideas of Islam and Christianity. I want to engage as much as we can back and forth. As we sign off here, hit that thumbs up, hit that heart button. Just let us know that you're here tonight. And again, Facebook will be happy to know that you were engaging, and YouTube as well, that we're engaging and people are joining in. So thanks for joining us. Again, tcarpenter@bethanychurch.com if you have questions, and we will see you next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. All right. Blessings to you all. We'll see you soon. Take care.